Welcome back to another edition of the podcast, and today is our 24-25 National League predictions. The one video where we predict the National League from 1 to 24 that we do every single season. It's always quite an enjoyable episode, not so much when we have to react to them at the end of the season, but Paul, no, looking forward to this.
Yeah, as best you can, Luke. It's like I think we've sort of spoken about this a few times in the summer in relation to what this league is this season. It's a very, very much more even field, isn't it? So sitting there sort of this week and looking at the 1 to 24s, I was like, crud, there's a whole number of cases, even more so this season than last, that a team could be in the top 7 or could be in the bottom half of the table. So yeah, we'll see how it goes, shall we? It's an interesting one.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be an interesting one. So for those who are watching, please consider liking and subscribing. I would suspect there will be a lot of new people coming across the podcast. This is usually quite a popular episode, so please consider liking and subscribing. Let us know your thoughts on our predictions below, and also send your predictions in the comments as well below. We'll probably expect we'll get some criticism. I think everyone does, and but what I will say is, we do research these predictions. I'd like to think they're not lazy. They're not going to be very good at the end of the season because they never are. But we have kind of done our research on these predictions, and we are going to justify why we've put your club or any club in the position that we're going to put them. So I think without any further ado, let's get straight into it then. So starting with 24th place, let's go with you first, Paul. Who have you gone for?
I've gone with Tamworth. So I think last year we really saw the bottom, the promoted sides rather, really struggle at the bottom, didn't we? And I think the gulf between National League North and South is getting bigger every season, and especially with the full-time status of a lot of the National League teams now. So, you won't be surprised that the sort of bottom 4 of my team will sort of feature some of those teams that have been promoted. And I think Tamworth, from what I understand, aren't full-time, and that's a real struggle in this league. Following Wealdstone, and we'll talk about them more sort of nearer where we, later on. And, they've had to sort of decide to go into that part-time straight full-time model with some of the players. And if Tamworth haven't done the same, then, that could be a real struggle for them. They've got to start well. They don't seem to have invested very heavily into the side. They're relying on that National League North winning team, and they've got to have a good start. I think when you see any promoted side, you've got to get points on the board, get to 30 points maybe by Christmas, and then see where that takes you. So I think it's going to be a real struggle for them. They're going to enjoy it. Like most of the promoted sides come into this league out of the regional leagues. It's a great league to be in. There's some massive teams. And, Tamworth's not the place that these bigger clubs will want to go to. It's one of those sort of stadiums that's a ground rather than a stadium. So we'll see. They'll use that to their advantage, but I think they're going to struggle, and they'll come out bottom of the table.
I've agreed with you on Tamworth in 24th position, and I think it's quite a common prediction to put them at the bottom. And there's a lot of signs for me. They've had back-to-back promotions, haven't they, in the last couple of seasons? And I think it's they've kind of peaked too early, in my opinion. I think this opportunity's come too early. I don't think they've got a squad that's ready for the National League. I don't think they've got the funds, which is kind of to do with them being part-time as well. They've got a restricted budget. And so they haven't been able to invest players that I think are ready for this level. And I don't think they can rely on last season's squad to be able to keep them up. They were very good defensively last season, but going forward, yes, strong, but they needed to add more, I think, for this division. And I don't think that's something they've done. Chris Way's come in, Hayden Hollis as well from Dorking, but there's no outstanding signing there compared to some of the other promoted clubs. So for me, I think Tamworth are going to struggle this season and finish 24th. Very similar to Oxford last season, who we both got correct as well. So in 23rd place then, who have you gone for, Paul?
I've gone for another promoted side. I've gone for Boston United. Yes, they've got history of being in the National League. They're a bigger club, I would imagine, than Tamworth. But, they scraped in through the playoffs, didn't they? So, they've got a good manager in Culverhouse, and as much as he knows what the National League's about, unfortunately, when he was there last time, he was with Kings Lynn, and I think he's going to have a very similar battle on his hands like he did with Kings Lynn in relation to trying to keep them up. I mean, they've recruited Adam Marriott up front, who's a proven goal scorer at this level, but hasn't really done it for a couple of seasons. Again, investment probably hasn't been what you would expect, but for all of these clubs, they can't. What you got to understand is they can't go and spend loads and loads and loads of money if they don't have it to try and stay in the league. They've got to just almost accrue stepping stones throughout the league. Like Wealdstone have, like Maidenhead have, maybe like even Sutton did, and then got into the Football League. From a number of years. So you've really just Altrincham are the same. You've just got to build and build and build. So they'll be looking at wanting to stay in the league. I think they're better placed than maybe Tamworth to do that if they can. But again, I just think it's going to be a really difficult period for them, and I can see them going back down.
In 23rd place then for me, and I think I've fallen into the trap once again, and I think they probably will end up proving me wrong. I've gone for Maidenhead once again, and it's quite a bit. It's just everyone seems to just put them in 20 of every single season because the squad should go down, but Alan Devonshire always finds a way to keep them up. And for me, apart from that, and apart from them having the experience in the league, there's no way this Maidenhead side should survive with the players that they've lost and the replacements that they've brought in. Azara's left to go to Harrogate defensively. Beckwith's gone to Rochdale. Kinsella's, of course, retired as well. So defensively, I think they're going to really struggle this season, and that's something that's managed to keep them up the last couple of seasons. Nathaniel George, going forward, of course, has moved on as well to York. So for me, I look at Maidenhead, and I think the overall squad just isn't good enough for this division, and I think the amount of miracles Devonshire's pulled off in the last couple of seasons, it's going to come to an end at some point. And for me, I think it will be this season, especially with them having such a small squad as well, just an 18-man squad. So I think Maidenhead, for me, are going to struggle this season. 22nd place then, who have you gone for?
I've gone for Woking. And the only reason I've gone for Woking is I have no idea, and I think none of us do, what the financial impact what the impact the finances have on the club as a whole. It's very easy for us to turn around and say, well, the manager and the squad don't worry about the finances, but of course they're going to worry. Are they going to get paid? What are the players going to do? Is someone going to buy it for £1 and come in with a load of money? Because you can see what happened to Scunthorpe. You can see what happened to Southend in the last few seasons. Rochdale have struggled. So I've gone with Woking. They've got to arrest the slide from last season, haven't they, Luke? I mean, they were terrible last year. I think many of us probably had them in and around the playoffs, and they were lucky not to get relegated. And again, I don't think they've done enough, really. I mean, Michael Doyle's he's had a pre-season under his belt. He's brought some of his own players in. Does that help? Does the uncertainty help? There's a lot of unanswered questions with Woking, and they could be a surprise package either way. And I think they're going to be a surprise package in a negative sense, and I think they're going to struggle.
I've actually gone for Boston. So 2 of the 3 teams we've put in the drop zone so far we've agreed on. I think Boston, for me, of course, were quite fortunate to get promoted last season. They were in and out of the playoffs in the National League North. For the majority. So I think if they were to get promoted, which of course they did via the playoffs, it was clear that they needed to invest a lot into the squad. And I think they've put a stronger case together, like you mentioned, than Tamworth with the players that they've brought in. Adam Marriott coming in. I think the only issue for me is that he's very injury prone. He's not been fully fit for a number of seasons now. Dan Mooney's come in, who we know is a player on his day, but has been off form ever since he left Altrincham the first time around. So for me, I look at the replacements, the players that they've brought in, and I just don't think that they're to the standards of what they once were. And the overall Boston side, you look at it, and I just don't think it's ready for the National League, especially with Mooney actually leaving and Knowles. One Mooney out, another one comes in. And the other players that they've recruited have all come from the league below. So for me, I look at Boston, and I just don't think they're going to have the goals to be able to survive and the overall squad. So unfortunately, I think Boston will finish 22nd place. 21st then, Paul, who have you gone for?
Oh gosh, did my heart rule my head, etc., and not put the Wealdstone in there because I don't think they'll get relegated, but I know many will have them in there. I've gone with Ebbsfleet, and I think they changed their manager last year. Dennis Kucher, went, and they had a real upturn in fortunes. But have they built on that? Will they start the season as well as they finished it? Again, I think it's a question, and I think they did well to get out of it last season, but I can't see any reason why they won't get dragged into it again. I think that having the management team that they have in terms of experience in the National League is vital. Kept I believe, very similar squad to last year, so they'll give themselves a fighting chance. So I've had to put someone in there, so I've plumped with Ebbsfleet.
I've gone them for Woking, which means we've agreed on 3 of the 4 teams that we've put in the drop zone, and similar kind of reasons to yourself. Clearly having a lot of financial issues at the moment. I think it's quite strange. They're shipping a lot of players out on loan. Matty Robinson, Gregor Cox has left. They've lost a number of players as well, including the likes of Brown, Kaboa, Edwards, Kellerman, Robinson, and Casey. That was the core of the squad that was the reason they did so well 2 seasons ago when they finished inside of the playoffs. And I think it was quite strange to see that they've shipped all them off and that they did underperform like they did last season. But those players have clearly proven that they've got the ability to be top-end National League players. The replacements that they've made, Howie Beautyman's probably the standout, but he's in new surroundings and he's getting on now in age. And is he going to be that same player that was in his prime a couple of seasons ago? I personally don't think so. And I think the likes of Keane Harris has come in from Aldershot, which might look like a good signing on paper considering he's quite a high-scoring centre-half. But overall, defensively, Aldershot struggled last season. And for me, I just think with it being such a car crash off the field, I think Woking are really going to struggle this season. And I think they may actually drop down. And it'd be a massive shame for Woking. We've seen the ambitions that they've had the last couple of seasons, the progression that they've had. But it just feels like off the field, it's all going wrong at the moment, doesn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you look at Woking, with the players that they took on loan last year, they've got rid of 23 players. I mean, it's a massive turnover, and you've got to give a lot of credit to Michael Doyle, who kept them in the league last season, because they did look like they were slip and sliding all the way out of it. But will they do it again? I like you, Luke. I'm really not sure, and they've lost a lot of experience. Have they recruited well enough? I mean, time will tell. Again, I think they need to have a good start. I think all teams have to have a good start, but teams like that may be under the cosh a little bit are going to have a good start. When you look at Ebbsfleet, Dominic Polian was on fire at the beginning of last season. Went away did he go to the Africa Cup of Nations? Came out. I think he hardly scored a goal from that point on. So they're going to really have to rely on him. Getting Kwame Thomas in, who's a bit of experience from Aldershot up top, is going to help. Tyler Cordner, he's a National League defender, isn't he? We know that when he played at Aldershot and he went for 6 figures to York, it hasn't worked out. So to get him back playing, maybe that's something that is an advantage to Ebbsfleet. They've gone with a lot of experiences. We're at Fonguk from Southend, Kellerman from Woking, Giles Phillips and Oxford City. They're all good footballers on a day. I just got a gut feel that they're just not going to have enough.
20th place, and who have you gone for, Paul?
I've gone with AFC Fylde.
Ooh.
Yeah. I don't know why. I just, when you start looking at it, and a team's got to go somewhere, and I think Fylde are one of those that could push the boundaries of a playoff place or get sucked into a relegation dogfight. They've not been hugely consistent in the National League over the last couple of seasons. Beginning of last season, they really struggled to score goals, didn't they? And I think that was what their Achilles heel was. We'll have to see whether that's sort of improved coming into this season. But second season syndrome, third season syndrome, will they continue to be okay? there'll be enough to stay up, but I think it will just be a season of struggle for them.
My 20th place, and I've gone for your boys, and I have to admit, I kept changing between Wealdstone and Woking, but the reason that I feel that Wealdstone are going to survive is because I just think overall they've got that slight bit more experience. I think the players that they've brought in, Mariappa, he's an ex-Premier League centre-half. He might not be to the same ability of that now that he's playing at Wealdstone, but he's got that experience. Eastman with Sutton managed to get out of this division, played over 30 games for Sutton last season. Of course, they've lost quite a lot of players. Charlie Baker, De Silva, Alarakia, the two wingers as well in Alarakia and De Silva. But for me, I just look at Wealdstone and I think they're going to survive just. Last season they did go downhill after Stuart Maynard left, and I don't think they were the same team, but they did manage to get over the line in the end. I believe a few decent results towards the end of the season, but a full season for Matty Taylor. Now I think there's quite a lot of split opinions about him as a coach. For me, I like the appointment. I think he's a young coach. And I think for me, he's got players around there who've got the experience to guide him as well, like Mariappa, like Eastman, and like the players that they had previously, in Dyer, who took charge of the team last season for a short period of time. You've got Cook still, Kretschmar still there. So for me, I just think overall Wealdstone will just be able to get over the line, but I do think it's going to be close. 19th place then, Paul, who have you gone for?
I've gone for Wealdstone. Similar to what you're saying there, Luke. There's some concerns as a fan of the club. There's some concerns around the goalkeeper. I think we have been very fortunate in our National League and National League South days to have some very strong goalkeepers. And if you see where they are now, plying their trade in Scotland, plying their trade in England in the professional leagues. Jed Ward has just gone on loan to Forest Green. We'll talk about a bit more later on. I think having Matthews come in as a goalkeeper, he's had more clubs than he's had minutes on the pitch in the last few years. So I think he could be a bit of a problem. Could prove me wrong because our goalkeepers have always started off a little bit sort of nervy and got better as they've gone on. Matty Taylor is definitely one that splits opinion, like you said. He hasn't exactly pulled up trees when he's been in the Football League as a coach. He's come to Wealdstone to try and prove himself, I would imagine, more than anything else, and get back into the management game. And the positives are we've gone to a hybrid model. The positives are we've got some real experience through the middle of the pitch now. With Mariappa, who's our new club captain or match day captain, with Jack Cook, I assume, is still in that senior leadership role. You've got Craig Eastman playing in midfield. Unfortunately, he's going to be injured, I think, for the next few weeks at least. He got hurt in a pre-season friendly. Enzo Bojuwine coming in from Eastleigh, ex-Notts County. So there's Sam Ashford, who's played in the National League for Woking, for example, who was in the Irish League last year. So there's a spine that I think is I wouldn't suggest better than last season, but there's a lot of experience in there. And I think that's a positive. A positive is that we've got a full-time manager, a full-time physio, a full-time strength and conditioning coach. We're on a hybrid model, so we're just pushing on that little bit more. We've got 22, maybe 23 players named now in the squad, and there's I believe quality all over. It's how they gel. It's how Matty Taylor plays. It's how they buy into his philosophies. And like we've always had, we've had good starts in the National League with Wealdstone, and we've hung on a little bit towards the end of the season. And that I don't think that's going to change this season. So, we start off with Dagenham and then Oldham, first couple of games, 2 difficult games, get something out of them, and it will look a little bit better than it probably does now, because I know that we're going to be a lot of people's favourites to be in our bottom 4.
In 19th, then, for myself, I've gone for Eastleigh, which, of course, they finished, I think, 11th or 12th in the league last season. Quite a high prediction considering where they were at some points. And I think a lot of that was down to Paul McCallum, who was the top goal scorer in the National League last season. And you don't like to say that one individual carried them, but I do think to a certain extent he did last season. And, of course, he's still with the club for the time being, but it's likely that he's going to move on. I know Forest Green and Southend have both been rumoured to sign him. Not just Callum, though, rumoured to leave. Boldwine's left, who's a player that, of course, has signed for you guys and someone that I can't speak highly of enough as an individual, a goal-scoring winger that can take players on, and he is frightening on his day. Camps has gone as well. He's dropped down a division to Dorking. Kelvin Davis is a manager. Am I particularly sold on him as a manager, being a brilliant manager? No. I'm not excited by it. Rutherford's left as well. And I just look at that Eastleigh squad and I'm quite down on it going into this season. Whereas last season I were quite optimistic that they were going to have a good season. And I think overall they did underperform. And I think this season they're going to underperform even more and finish in 19th place, which would be a massive shame for Eastleigh. But yeah, I think they're going to finish in 19th. So 18th place then, Paul, who have you gone for?
I've gone for Braintree Town.
We've agreed on that one. I've gone for Braintree as well. And
do you know what? They've done everything they can in pre-season to get a squad together that's going to keep them in the National League. They've got rid of players that clearly, may or may not be good enough for the National League, were very good for them in the National League South. The likes of Gianni Critchlow and Barris Altintop, who's gone over to, I believe, Ireland. But the quality they brought in across the park is unbelievable in terms of Langston from Eastleigh at centre back. You got Robinson from Woking in midfield, Louis Lomas, who was obviously at Southend and a real prospect until his injuries really got the better of him over the last couple of seasons, along with Akinde and Ifeong up top. I mean, they've just got a gel because there's a lot of players. I think it's probably about 10, 12, 15 players they've signed. So as long as they gel right, I think they could be a real force in this. And, the reason I put them in that sort of position is they're gonna have an up and down season because it's their first season in it.
Yeah.
They may well surprise us and really push on and be consistent, but I think there could be a level of inconsistency just because of the nature of this turnover of the squad and being new to the league after a few seasons away. So, but I'm really I'm positive about them being one of the teams that does well out of being promoted.
Yeah, they were a side for me that if I'm going to put them anywhere, I'm going to put them higher for myself. They're a side that have had a massive turnover, and I think they've done the right thing. They've been ruthless. They've shipped off a lot of last season's squad and brought in players that have really established themselves and proven themselves at this level. They've got a prolific goal scorer that scored 16 goals last season in the National League in Effingham. Vennings is someone who impressed at Bromley. Probably doesn't probably have the experience to be able to step up. Callum Powell, someone at Southend who I've always liked as a player, but just hasn't been consistent. Matt Robinson was one of the best midfielders in the National League only 2 seasons ago. So, yeah, I'm quite excited by this project at Braintree. 13 new players coming in as we're recording this. Angelo Harrop seems a young and enthusiastic coach as well. Jamal Filefield, just one more name to put in there for defensively. So for me, Braintree, I'm really excited to see how they do perform this season. But like you mentioned, the only concern for me might be gelling for them. I think it's going to take them time to gel as a team. Obviously, a lot of these players do know each other because they've all been around the National League for a number of seasons. But yeah, I just think it's going to take a bit of time to gel, and I think consistency might be an issue over the course of the season for them to finish any higher. But no, for me, Braintree, I think will finish 18th place. So we've agreed on that one, Paul. 17th place then, Paul. Who have you gone for?
I've gone for Yeovil Town.
We've agreed again. I've gone for Yeovil as well.
Yeah. Similar to Braintree, really. When you look at Braintree's, go back to them just briefly, when you look at their recruitment, they've recruited from players within this league. They may be a bit more experienced. They may not have got so many minutes with the teams they're from, but, they brought someone in from Eastleigh, Bromley, Dagenham, York, Borehamwood, Southend, Woking, just as an example. Whereas you look at the teams we put in that bottom four, Tamworth and Boston, and no disrespect to them, they're getting lads from National League South, National League North, Northern Prem, and it's a big step up. So Braintree have gone and got their recruitment from, and I think when you look at Yeovil, they're not dissimilar. I think Mark Cooper's probably gone with a little bit more from leagues below, but they did win it at a bit of a canter last season, and Yeah, when we discussed with him about it on the pod we did, Luke, I think he seems fairly confident that they're going to do okay in this league. I just think there might be a level of inconsistency. They weren't tested defensively last year. This year they're going to be tested defensively, and if they play that front foot attacking football and want the ball more than the other team, they might open themselves up. And I think that's where they might come a little bit unstuck this season. Again, another team that might surprise us and push on a little bit more than we think. But I think they'll be happy to consolidate in there. Mark Cooper's got a 3-year contract now. So, they've got time to build. As long as they don't go completely kaput this season, again, it's one of those 3, 4, 5,000 in the huge park every week. They've got something to build on. And I think, they just got to just respect it, come into the league, settle in, and then push on from next season.
Well, they took the National League South by storm last season, did Yeovil, and I think making the step up now, they've been here before. Mark Cooper has as well. He knows what the league is about, and they've been quite loyal, I think, to the squad. They've kept that core of the squad, I feel, and they've added to it with some real quality in the likes of Aaron Jarvis coming in from Torquay. Like I've said with Yeovil, I can't see them, kind of shocking anyone this season. I think they'll just be happy to consolidate being back in the National League. But I think 17th place is a reasonable finish for them, you might say. I think Huish Park will be a difficult place to go for me. But I think, they've kept the core of the squad from last season that were comfortably too good for the National League South. And I think they'll be able to comfortably survive in the National League then. So 16th place, who have you gone for, Paul?
I've gone for Maidenhead United, and that's purely based on the fact that they never get relegated. And, yes, they've had to change their fullbacks, and, they're probably, are they still part-time? Are they hybrid model? Funny enough, I actually saw one of their players in the summer and had a quick chat with him. Lad at the back used to play Will, so Alan, his name's just gone out of my head. And he was saying that they're going to go to a sort of a hybrid model. Some of them are going to a hybrid model. So Alan Massey it was. I spoke to Alan Massey. So, he's going to give it another go. He's got a lot of experience. He won't get many minutes, I don't suppose. But, he seemed fairly confident that they'll do all right. And the thing is, Luke, with Maidenhead, what we don't know is how much money will they use from the transfer of their ex-centre-back who's gone to West Ham from Wolves, Max Gilman.
Yeah, they haven't used it much. I think they're doing it, a lot of it's off the field, but maybe the one thing, this might go against what I've said about Maidenhead, where I feel they're going to struggle, is if they do struggle halfway through the season, that might be a last resort where they'll be able to dip into those funds to bring in players to be able to keep them.
They're desperate for a new ground within the town. I know that much. Whether that the few million that they've allegedly made out of the transfer is being looked at the infrastructure off the field, and Alan Devonshire carries on with what he's been doing on the field. But I think you're right. Is there a buffer? I don't follow Maidenhead, so I don't know. And Maidenhead fans will be better placed to know what happens with that money and how sensible they are with it. But it certainly will be there to try and help them recruit if they need to. But no disrespect to Maidenhead, but you can still only recruit a certain type of player because of the size of the club and the training facilities and the training times they do. Unless you're going to go and pay them thousands of pounds a week, which I don't suppose Maidenhead would do. You wouldn't want to go and make themselves poorer for the sake of it. But I think losing Zico Acer and Sam Beckwith, the fullbacks, is a difficult one. But when you look at, and Nathaniel George up top, they're 3 players difficult to replace. But Alan Devonshire has done it week in, week out, year on year, and managed to get them staying in that National League. And I can't see it being any different this season.
Now, in 16th place for myself, I've gone for Ebbsfleet, and that's quite a high prediction. And I think it's another situation where, if anything, I wanted to put them higher. Last season, since Danny Seal came into the side, they were performing on the form table like a playoff side. Over the course of the season, do I think they'll be able to push that high up? No. But the players that they've brought in, Kellerman's coming, Cordner's coming from York City on loan, and he's a player, when he signed for York, it was quite a marquee signing, and it just hasn't worked out for him at York defensively, in my opinion. he's one of the best centre halves in this division. And he certainly was when he was at Aldershot. They've kept quite a good core squad from last season. You know, Polian's still there. I know Ken Locke's obviously gone on to Barnet, but for me, I look at the side last season. I think they grew into the season. I can't speak highly enough of the manager in Danny Seal. So for me, I think Ebbsfleet will be able to finish 16th and be able to comfortably be away from the drop zone. So 15th place then, Paul, who have you gone for?
I've gone for Eastleigh. And again, I've based it on the fact that they've done okay in the last few years in the National League. So they've got that experience in there. And yeah, he got rid of a few players, but he's brought his own players in. I think I'm a bit like with you with Eastleigh. You know, I'm not convinced on that manager. No one really knows too much about him. You got to give him a pre-season and a full season. He came in partway through last season again. He's brought in a couple of decent players. You know, is it Shade or Sade? Tyree Shade from Swindon, who did really well with Solihull, and Richard Brindley's obviously won a National League with Notts County. So he's got a couple of good lads in there. But I think Paul McCullum has got to be scoring that 30-odd goals again for them to be in and around 15th. You know, last year, where did they finish? 13th. So, you know, not dissimilar in where I think they'll finish again. But I think you're right with your prediction. They could also get sucked right into that bottom sort of mini table of people clubs that could get relegated or nearly relegated. So I think it's interesting to see what their new manager does in terms of this pre-season, whether Paul McCullum stays and whether some of those better players he signed actually step up and do a bit for him.
For myself, then in 15th place, I've gone for Aldershot, and that's quite a low prediction for them. If you actually look at the losses that they've had, Laurent Tollerage, Josh Stokes, the major losses, and they finished just outside of the playoffs last season. I don't expect them to be able to replace players in that fashion going forward. But for me, when you're losing those sort of players, I just feel like really going to struggle this season. You know, they've still got Jack Barham there, and he clearly needs to step up. But for me, I kind of use the analogy of, you know, when there's Neymar, Messi, and Suarez, if you take Messi and Neymar out the side, you're going to be weaker, aren't you? Defensively, I think they've actually strengthened. Marcus Dewhurst has obviously come in. Jenkins is coming from Chelmsford, and Magoma's back from injury now. And maybe the best thing for Aldershot would be to do is to adapt the style. But the players that they've lost going forward for me are major losses in Tollerage and Stokes. And I do fear for Aldershot that they're going to be a lot weaker than what they were last season. 14th place then. Who have you gone for, Paul?
I've gone with Dagenham and Redbridge. I think they've got a really good manager in Ben Strevens. Personally, I've got a lot of time for him, and I think he'll always do well in the National League. He got a bit of a bum deal when he first came in, didn't he? Not last season, back into the season before, where they sort of asset stripped a little bit and got rid of a few players. And then last year, I don't think their recruitment was superb, really. And because of that, they really managed to be consistently inconsistent. And I think they started to show their true selves at the back end of last season and what Strevens can do. And actually, his recruitment this year has been much, much better, isn't it, in terms of who he's brought in. And you look at their attacking sense alone with Umrah, Grego Cox, Pereira, Stevenson, Harrison Day from Concord, and Junior Moraes on loan till January from Notts County, who's going back to where he sort of did so well before he went up to Notts. You know, he's done some really, really good business in that attacking sense. And who he's let go, I don't think it's really affected the squad. You know, Sydney Ivey really wasn't in the team too much. David Long King wasn't in the team too much. Omar Musa wasn't in the team too. So, yeah, I think they've done really well. He's kept the core of the squad, and I think they're going to have a really good season. I've got them sort of mid-table, but I think that's just purely because they'll only get better the season after and the season after, I think. And I think if they keep that manager in place and they keep that squad in place, you know, and build on it in the next couple of years, then they're going to sort of push up those leagues.
I've actually gone for Rochdale then in 14th place, moving down from 11th last season. And you know, you look at the players that they've lost. Sinclair, Hayes has obviously moved on. Nevitt defensively, you know, Taylor and John as well, on the defensive side as well. And for me, I looked at Rochdale last season, and I think they got weaker in that second half of the season. They didn't have much depth. And I think this season, with the players that they've brought in, Alarakia, Beckwith, defensively, overall, I look at the players they've brought in, and do I think they're to the standards to really be able to push on to closer towards the playoffs? And for me personally, no. Devante Rodney coming back fully fit, had a good end to the season when he were fully fit last season. Might be somewhere where they'll be able to generate a lot of goals. But for me, Rochdale, I'm not too impressed with them. They don't excite me going into this season. So I think 14th in a mid-table position is probably the correct position for them at the moment. I know a lot of people have put them a lot higher, but for me, I look at that squad and the starting 11, and I don't think it's as strong as what it was last season. So maybe they've got more depth now, but I just think overall the starting 11 ain't going to be as good as what it was last season, and that's why I think they're going to drop down a little bit to 14th place. 13th place, then, who have you gone for?
I've gone for Rochdale. I think they're just going to be that little bit more stable this year, aren't they? They've had a takeover. They've given a manager a 3-year contract. I mean, I didn't see Rochdale play. I didn't go to the game last year away at their place, so I don't really know too much about how they play. But what I do know is that they've taken Taran Alarakia from Wealdstone and Aaron Henry, who's been on loan and they're both good footballers, you know, and on their day they could really make a difference. So I think he clearly is looking at trying to play an attacking, possession-based style of football, and I think they'll do okay. But the reason they're only in sort of the halfway mark, with similar to you, Luke, is a team of Rochdale's sort of size, when they've been in the Football League, you'd imagine they should be sort of pushing on into the playoffs, but their recruitment doesn't suggest that. And whether they just want another season of consolidation, you know, don't go and spend loads of money like they did before. Losing a player of the ability of Campbell is a real loss to them. I get that. So, you know, they're going to have to try and replace him over next. Sorry, not Campbell, Sinclair. They have to replace Sinclair over the next few years. So, yeah, I think they're just going to respect the league. They've bought a couple of players in that's have got a little bit about them in terms of what I've seen. You know, let's just see how they get on. But I don't think they're going to pull up any trees. But I don't think they're going to be in any danger.
I've gone for Sutton then in 13th place. I think when I look at Sutton, it's going to be a season of transition coming down from the Football League. 24 players have been brought into the side. It's basically a new squad for them. You look at the players, and they've gone for quite a youthful approach, where they're bringing in youngsters that have fallen out of the Football League or coming from the lower divisions. You know, De Silva's someone in this division that I think's proven himself at Torquay. I think he was at your guys, wasn't he, last season?
Yeah.
And he's a player for me when I look at him. He's quite an exciting player, someone that, you know, you turn up on a Saturday and he's the sort of player that you're looking out for, because he's someone that can create chances. And yeah, I just think Sutton, with the massive turnover and them coming down from the Football League, I just think 13th place, would it be that bad for them? You know, we've seen sides before falling through the net and come from the Football League and drop all the way into the National League North. It's not particularly a car crash there for Sutton, but I just think a season of consolidation, getting used to the division again, embedding these new players who are coming in, I think it won't be an awful position for me. So I think 13th place for Sutton. I'm in 12th place then, sorry.
I've gone with Hartlepool United. You know, let's just see whether they can get through a season without having to replace their manager twice. So,
Yeah.
you know, they've got Darren Sarll in there who knows the leagues. He clearly wanted an opportunity in the league because he's moved from the south all the way up to the northeast. He knows the sorts of players he requires. He's clearly gone in there with a plan in mind, because the amount of players he has released, and when you look at who he's only recruited 2 for 7 players. So most of them midfielders and attackers. So he knew what he wanted. He got a chance to see his squad at the back end of last year. They finished 12th. I don't think they're going to improve on that. I genuinely can't see it. They didn't tear up any trees. They weren't exciting to watch. They were sometimes inconsistent. I think Adam Campbell from Crawley's a massive signing. He's won League Two in the playoffs and then drops back down. Instead of playing in League One, he's come back to the National League to be home, nearer his home and be in the area he's from. So I think that's a real big signing from that point of view. But apart from that, I don't think there's really been too many other outstanding signings that they've made.
I think for me with my 12, I reckon there's going to be a lot of people that probably unsubscribe from the channel when they see me 12, and I'm going to obviously have to give a good reason for it because they're such a big club. I've actually gone for Oldham Athletic in 12th place, and you know, part of me the last couple of seasons, ever since I've dropped down into the division, I think about them in the playoffs every single season. Last season they splashed the cash to a certain extent. James Norwood came in. It's not been a bad signing for them. He scored, I think, 18 goals for them last season, but it's not been an amazing signing. I don't think he's lived up to the expectation to a certain extent, although he scored a good number of goals last season. But, Mickey Mellon came in last season. I think we thought when he came in, right, that's it now. Oldham, they're going to be able to stabilise inside the playoffs. And they fell out of the playoffs last season. And I don't think they've brought in enough players for me that's going to determine them actually going to finish inside the playoffs this season. And, it's just very average there. You've got Monf, who's coming from the Football League. It's just going to be a very hoofball style of football. And, of course, that worked a couple of seasons under Mickey Mellon with Tranmere. But I just feel the league's progressed since then. They signed that. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his name. The lad from Rochdale, a midfielder that was a fringe player at Rochdale, I just think, signing players like that, I just look at the signings overall and I'm not too impressed. And they've kept quite a lot of last season's starting 11 still at the club. So for me, I look at Oldham and I just think it's going to be another mediocre season for them. And if Mickey Mellon is sacked, I think they will be in trouble then because all these players are built for him and his squad. And I just think if a new manager came in, I think they'd struggle even more. So there's a massive expectation there at Oldham, but I just don't think they've got the squad yet to be inside the playoffs. And that's going to be very controversial. A lot of people will probably be switching off now from the Oldham fan base, but I just think just because they're a big club doesn't mean that they're going to be able to finish inside the playoffs. And I think overall, I look at the squad and I just don't think it's going to be good enough. So 12th place for Oldham, which I will admit is a very low prediction. 11th place. Well, Paul, I just want to get what's your opinions on that then, because that's quite a controversial one.
I can exactly see what you're saying, Luke. They've not proven themselves to be any different than what you're saying over the last few seasons. I have put them higher, but and I'll give my reasons as to why. But I can. Makes a logical sense. He's similar to what I say about Woking in terms of the uncertainty. There's a justification to say that Oldham will finish in mid-table because they can't really prove us any other way, can they? In the way that they've gone about their last couple of seasons in the National League, so they've got a lot to prove. I think they're one of the big teams that have got a lot to prove, and they will do it at some point. Whether it's this season or not, who knows?
Who have you put in 11th place then, Paul?
I put Aldershot in 11th place, and I think last year they surprised a lot of people, didn't they? They were a young side. They were fearless. Tommy Widrington sort of almost recruited a load of unknowns, that from the areas he knew and from the leagues he knew. And two of those proved to be absolute stellar signings in Tolaj coming in from Brighton and Josh Stokes from the lower leagues, who's now going to go on to Bristol. And, they're two massive lads to lose without a shadow of a doubt. And I think I agree, that front three, losing two of them is difficult. But, they did fall away at the back end of last year. Tolaj and Stokes didn't perform as well as they maybe should have done. They didn't. Aldershot had the playoffs in their grasp and they didn't quite know what to do to get over the line. And I think, they'll learn a lot from that without a shadow of a doubt. Tommy Widrington will learn a lot from that. I can't see them doing as well as they did last year, but I think they'll comfortably be in mid-table. And when you look at who they've brought in terms of a couple of their signs, Marcus Dewars did very well for Wealdstone last year. I saw him on a regular basis, and I wouldn't say he was the best goalkeeper in the world, in terms of internationally rather, but dependable. I think James Henry from Oxford United is an excellent sign in midfield. You always need experience, especially when you look at who Aldershot have recruited over the last couple of seasons. They have been, on the whole, young lads, and I think they've got to be positive. I hope that their supporters don't get on Tommy Woodrosson's back if they're not doing quite as well as they did last year. I think they overachieved last year, and sometimes that's a bit of a problem coming into next season. Is if you overachieve, there's an expectation to do it again, rather than being realistic and saying, actually, we overachieved. Where we should be is maybe here, and I think that's where Aldershot could be, is that mid-table team. So we'll see how it goes. Hopefully, Tommy Woodrosson's allowed just to carry on, and there's no knee-jerk reactions if you don't start well. But I think that they'll be okay. And looking at who he's brought in a lot of other unknowns from the national leagues, regional leagues, and if they're as good as what they were last year in terms of recruitment, I think they'll be okay.
11th place for myself, then I've actually gone for Altrincham, who had a very good season last season, finishing comfortably inside the playoffs, and of course were knocked out to Bromley in the playoff semi-final. But they've retained a good core of the squad, I feel, overall. The only major loss is Con Clark, and I think that is a big loss for them. For me, I thought he was the best player in the whole division last season. I think he got the most assists, and he was one of the top goal scorers as well. And I know you can say, well, it's probably impossible to replace someone like that, which it is. So you need other players to be able to produce, that make up for those goals. Ollie Crankshaw was someone last season who signed for Altrincham, who didn't particularly get a chance because he was injured after the second game of the season. Newby's someone who was injured a lot last season, but when he came in, he's someone who scored a number of goals as well. Linney's someone who can step up as well as a striker. Lucas Weaver's someone who excites me as well. Of course, he's come from Cone, from the lower league, scored 42 goals in his league last season. But I think the overall recruitment, Tom Crawford's come in. He's not someone I'm over keen on. I don't look at that and go, what a signing. Nuttall, someone who's been around this division, an aging player that kind of goes against the kind of recruitment that Altrincham tried to look at. And I just think they did overachieve last season. I think they played out their skin, and with Con Clark leaving, I do think that's going to be a massive, massive loss for them. Tyler Golden's come in, but defensively, do I think they actually needed to bring in a right back? No. So for me, I just feel with Altrincham, I think they'll still have a good season. I think 11th won't be an awful season for them. But I just think with Con Clark leaving, and I think they did overachieve a lot last season, I just feel that Altrincham are going to slip off a little bit and then finish in 11th place. 10th place then, Paul, who have you gone for?
I've gone for FC Halifax Town. I think you might know a bit about them, Luke.
Yeah, I'll take that. I won't mind that 10th.
Well, I take a lot of positivity from what you talk about Halifax. You obviously know them way more than I do, and we talk about them. But I think the problem Halifax have got is the goal scoring. They've always been good defensively, haven't they? And Rob Harker got 9 goals last year. He's not going to be there next year. Zach Emerson's come in from Blackpool, unknown at National League level, clearly got ability because he's been in the EFL system. So I think with Halifax, really, it's a case of do what they did at the back. Can they prove what they did up top? And I can't see it. So I think they're just going to be, again, in and around that playoff positions. They're just a strong, well-drilled, know the league. The manager knows the league. They always do well in the cups over the last few years. I think, if they can get their ground issues sorted or, whatever it may be and get a bit more investment, then they're going to look upwards. But, they've lost a few key players and brought in some, well, it appears sort of young lads or lads that haven't quite done it in the EFL. So you'll know more than I will about Halifax, but I can just see them being in and around that 10th spot.
I've gone for Dagenham then in 10th place. I think they'll improve from last season. Ben Strevens as a manager, someone that did very well at Eastleigh, and as first seasons go for Dagenham, it took a bit of time, but I think overall it wasn't an awful season for them. Maybe a little bit disappointing that they didn't have too much to play for, but they've got the likes of Marias, Junior Marias, who's come in, who we know what he's produced at Dagenham before. He's a great player. If they can get the best out of him again. Gregor Cox just coming from working. Pereira's, back, I think on a permanent now as well. Someone that still young, excites me. He's played he's been at Luton in the Premier League, so he's clearly got the ability there for me. If he can prove that Dagenham was still still don't know if that's going to happen, but I think he showed signs at the back end of last season. And they've retained last season's squad that I think is only going to get better under Ben Strevens. So for me, Dagenham, they're a club that I'm quite optimistic about going into next season. And I think 10th place would be a decent finish for them. I know they're another side that are quite ambitious, but ever since the Americans, I think, actually stopped putting money into the club at Dagenham, it's kind of gone a little bit downhill and a little bit stale now at Dagenham. So for me, I think 10th place wouldn't be too bad for them. But yeah, moving on to 9th place. I knew you gone for, Paul.
Altrincham Town. A bit like what you were saying, Luke. Chris Conn-Clark, one player doesn't make a team, but he was very influential, wasn't he? And I'm not surprised he's gone into the Football League, and I'm not surprised that Peterborough have signed him because they seem to unearth all these gems from non-league and National League. But they've not just lost Chris Conn-Clark, but they've lost Joey Jones, Dan Mooney, Mitch Hancock. So some real good sort of National League players, and they've really done well since they went full time a few seasons ago, just to keep in and around those playoff spots. Not really been able to push on. I like the idea of Joe Nuttall from Oldham. I saw him play for Scunthorpe in the season that Scunthorpe went down, and they were wretched, and he was their bright spark. And I'm not surprised he didn't get that he got that move to Oldham, and clearly it didn't work out for him. So I think he probably doesn't fit that mould of the way Altrincham play. But if you've got that big mobile target man up top, then you've got different ways of playing. If you need to, he can adapt to the way that they play. So they finished 4th last year, 77 points. I can't see them doing the same, but I can see them being in that top half.
I just feel that they played out the skin as well with Altrincham. For me last season, I always thought they're going to fall off at some point. They're going to fall off. And they didn't, to be fair to them. But I just think this season, with, Conn-Clark leaving, I know you've mentioned there one player don't make a team. And a lot of Altrincham fans online have been defending, saying you're not giving the squad this respect that they deserve. But for me, I just think, he was the best player in the league, in my opinion, last season. He got the most assists, I think 3rd top goal scorer, something like that. I think he scored 24 goals last season. That's a massive, massive loss. And I just feel Altrincham are going to fall off quite a bit this season. But for me, 9th place, then I've gone for Halifax Town, my own club. I think we'll be in and around the playoffs like we were last season. I know a lot of people from the outside will say Tyler Golden's left. Jamie Stott's left as well. You'd say defensively, they were very strong, and that's not what they relied on last season, and that's been dispatched. But for me, I look at players coming back from injury. Joe Cummins is coming back, Festus Harper. They're good standard centre halves who were very good for Halifax before they got injured. If we also look, Zach Emerson coming in going forward, unproven, but quite an exciting signing. I think the signing of the summer for us so far, and there's a lot of young players that have fallen out of the Football League that have got a lot to prove. And I just think we're going to be similar to where we were last season. I still have slight concerns going forward. But for me, overall, I'm not too concerned. I think we'll be in the top half once again. And Chris Millington is someone that I can't praise highly enough nowadays compared to how I used to feel. And I don't think he gets the respect he deserves. And I think you always know what to expect with a Halifax side. They're going to be very hard to beat. They might not score many goals, but they're going to be very hard to beat. And I think that's something that we're going to be once again. 8th place then, Paul, who have you gone for?
York City. And I would suggest that York City are going to be the most improved team in the National League. They got a very good manager in Adam Hinchelwood. He's got himself his pre-season. He'll be able to implement his footballing philosophies, which is one that is very, very good to watch. He's clearly gone out and got a couple of players that he knows in Ollie Pearce and Joe Felix, who are great in the attacking third. He knows Harrison Mayle, the goalkeeper from Dorking, who's highly respected and a real prospect. Tyree Sinclair is an attacking force as well, alongside Ollie Pearce. Having those two up top that's going to scare defences. I don't care what anyone says. Nathaniel George, even from Maidenhead, he was the thorn in the side of Wilson when I watched them down at the Vale last season. He scored a very good goal. So I think they're a very good. Sorry, that's my dogs. They're a very good football inside with some very good players. And and if looking at who he's got rid of as well, they're maybe Tyler Cordner, but do you remember all the players they recruited last year, Luke? They just weren't good enough for that level, were they? They whatever their recruitment model was, it didn't work. They seemed to spend a lot of money. They seemed to get above their station. They were lucky they didn't go down. They've learned their lesson, and I think they're going to be the most improved team in the league.
Very different then to your opinions on York going into last season. But no, for me, 8th place, I've actually gone for Gateshead, who had a very, very good season last season. I think finished 6th in the league. For me, with what happened, it was so unfortunate, and it should never happen again. I hope something like that never happens to any club again, where they were booted out of the playoffs due to no fault of the players or the management or the fans last season. It was due to I think, stadium, something like that. It wasn't up to EFL regulations. But going into this season, I think they'll be in a similar position. They've lost Marcus Dinanga, a proven goal scorer at this level. Ed Francis has obviously moved on, but they have replaced that. Jacob Butterfield, someone that's played as high as the Championship before with Derby, and yes, he's obviously getting on now, but with his experience, for me, I think he'll be a decent replacement to Ed Francis. And I think with the way that they play, they've proven in the past they've lost a number of players. I know at January time last season, I think 3 or 4 key players left the side, and then Ed Francis got injured, and they actually got stronger, I thought, as the season went on. So I don't see why they can't do that again. I think anyone who comes into that Gateshead side is going to do well because of the way they play. They play quite, possession-based football, and I think it's something that suits a lot of players, and that fits the bill with the players that they're trying to bring in. But the reason I think they're just going to fall short of the playoffs is they've got quite a small squad compared to the sides that I'm putting above them. So for me, I think Gateshead will finish in 8th place this season. Playoffs then, the top 7. Who have you got in 7th place then, Paul?
Luke, my 2 to 7, I think you could have just dropped them and put them in any position, dropped them again, and you could argue that that's how they would come out. For 7th, I've gone with Solihull Borough. I think last year I was harsh on them. I thought they were going to get relegated. They got a new director of football. They got a new manager who hasn't really done it at National League level. National League South, and Andy Wing. They had a big turnover of players. They're not the biggest football club in the league as it is. And I just genuinely thought and they were unbelievable, weren't they? And 2 Wembley finals in the space of a week. Fair play to them. They were fantastic. And if they can keep that up, I'd be amazed. And I don't think they will, but they'll be in and around the playoffs. And I've put them in 7th. They could easily finish 3rd, 2nd, or 3rd. But they just got to sort of go again. They've got Sam Bowen in from Wilson, who's a technically good footballer. Laurie Walker's a good goalkeeper from Barnet. John Bostock's clearly got quality from Notts County. Tani Cliff's won the league with Wrexham. So their recruitment's been very good. And genuinely, I could have put them between 2 and 7, and I've gone with 7th. And hopefully, they'll prove me wrong, for the sake of their fans. But good football inside. If they can be a bit more consistent at parts of the season, then they're really going to sort of do well again next season.
Now, this is a bit of my, I think, wild card of the predictions. I've got Fylde in 7th place. And I look at Fylde and I look at last season, and they were certainly a very inconsistent side. But going forward for me, they were very, very impressive. They had some great individuals, Eustabasi, Horton going forward. Of course, Kay, who's moved on to Oldham now. But you look throughout the side, and there's loads of goals in that side. the downfall for them was defensively, and that's something that they've addressed this season. You know, Riley's coming from the Football League, played over 30 games last season. Whelan's also coming from Carlisle, I believe. And, you know, there was a side for me that I'm very excited to see this season going forward against Halifax. I thought were very impressive in both games at our place. It just defensively where you could see that they were very vulnerable. And I think this season, for me, I think they've improved that. I'd go as far to say going forward last season, they had probably a playoff standard front line. It was just defensively. They probably had a side that probably won't even suit for the National League. So for me, I look at Fylde this season, and it's going to be my wild card because I'm really looking forward to seeing them play. Zanzala's coming, someone who's proven himself in the Football League. Jolly, a young striker from Tranmere who scored a few goals in the league above last season. So, yeah, Fylde are going to be my wild card in 7th place then. 6th place then, Paul, who have you gone for?
I've gone for Oldham Athletic, Luke, and I've kind of gone the opposite thinking to you, is that you've gone the logical view of, well, they've not done anything better than what we suggested. I've gone the thought that at some point they've got to do better than we've seen. Mm-hmm. And I think this season could be that point in case. You know, he's got rid of a lot of players. Clearly, the recruitment didn't work last year. You know, did they go a little bit too much of experience, try and pay too much money? Who knows? You know, we're not an Oldham fan, so it's a difficult one. It's a really odd club because off the field, you know, they've got everything sorted out. They've got the new ownership. You know, he seems to be a lovely chap. He's got the club at heart. It's a good atmosphere when you go out there as an away fan. You know, they look after you. But as a home fan, you know, Boundary Park should be a fortress, and it isn't. You know, it seems to be the reverse of that. So let's see what he's done. Let's see what his recruitment's like this summer. It's not as much as it was last year. I mean, when you look at it, he signed 7 players. Some you've mentioned. I think if they can get their act together, they'll be in the top 7 and they'll be pushing to get promoted.
For me, then, in 6th place, I've gone for York City, and I think that's the biggest improvement from last season. The reason I'd probably say it's not my wild card is because I think a lot of people will probably agree with me putting them in and around the playoffs. But you look at the players that they brought in, Pierce coming in from the league below. There's a lot of similarities between him and Langstaff with how he did in the league below. Got that moved into the National League and then flourished for Notts County. I don't think it'll be as good as him to that extent, but it's still a very good striker that I think will be good enough for the National League. Akinayemi from last season still there. Sinclair's coming. Nathaniel George. These are exciting players, and for me, I think York, they're going to be a proper entertaining side next season going forward. I think they'll score lots of goals under Hinshelwood, and for me, I'm really excited to see them. They've got a good goalkeeper in Harrison Mayle, probably one of the best goalkeepers in this division, I'd say. So, yeah, York, for me, I'm really excited to see them play this season. I think they'll have a major improvement on what they did last season. I think they're going to score lots of goals. Maybe defensively, they still might not be sorted for me. I think the way they're going to play is going to be very similar to how Aldershot played last season, where they're probably just going to attack and not think much about defence and try to outscore teams. And so for me, I think York, they're going to be the entertainers in the division, and I think they'll be able to finish just inside the playoffs in 6th place. 5th place, then, Paul, who have you gone for?
Not so much of a wild card, but I've gone with Gateshead. They would. I mean, it's an improvement what they did last season. I think they're such a good football inside that they gain so many points because of the way they play, and they're consistent in their approach, no matter what squad or what players that they have in. And, you know, Rob Elliott's done very well that transition in January where they lost, I think it was about 7, but I know you said 3 or 4, but they lost loan players back, didn't they? Not just lads that they had permanently. And I think, you know, getting Tiernan Brooks in goal is a good shout. He's National League standards. Mark Beck up top, again, experience, maybe slightly different to what we see in what Dejon Brown and Dinanga sort of offered last season. But I could just see them being, again, just a very good football inside. I think with what Gateshead do well is that, again, they attack that loan market well and they get the loan players in. And because of the type of football they play and the philosophy they have, they're able to attract players to the club. And if you look at, who they had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, they had 8 players out on loaned in last year at some point, have gone back out again. So they've got to use that loan market well. I know National League across the board tend to, but a team like Gateshead really rely on it because their squad is smaller. And I think disadvantage is they've lost Ed Francis, very, very good footballer, certainly deserved his time in the Football League now, having been I think he even captained England, didn't he, as a junior with the likes of Phil Foden. So, he clearly got the ability. So I think they're a little bit of my wild card, Gateshead, with one other I've got in there. But I think they'll prove to be just as good this season as they were last.
5th place for myself, then I've got Hartlepool, and I think a lot of down to that is the amount of injuries they had last season was the reason I felt that they struggled so much. Mancini, one of the best players in this division, I think he will be this season, and he was at the start of last season. I don't know if people who are watching this or you yourself, Paul, remember him at the start of last season when they were doing very well, and I think they were top of the league for the first couple of games. And he's back fully fit. Dodds, defensively, someone who's very good, very equipped to this division, is now back fully fit. Honorius, coming in from Dagenham last season, is now fully fit again. And I think they've added to that with the players that they've brought in. Campbell coming in. You mentioned earlier on a few pods a few weeks ago about him at Crawley probably being one of the better players at Crawley last season. And of course, they got promoted, Crawley did last season, and he's actually dropping down a division because he wants to be closer to home. So that's a massive coup, I think, for Hartlepool going into this season. They've kept last season's squad. The Savoué is still there, a quality, prolific striker. Ollie Gray is still there. They've got the likes of Waterfall defensively, who knows how to get out of this division. So for me, I look at Hartlepool and I think they're going to be a very hard side to beat. I think at home it's going to be a difficult place to go. So I think Hartlepool will improve a lot on what they did last season and finish in 5th place. 4th place then, Paul, who have you gone for?
Southend United. Very, very good football team. Very, very good manager. Great set of fans. Hopefully now they've got a good ownership. That was what was held them back. We know that we know the story. There's no point harping on about it. They've secured their future. Kevin Mayer can now go into the transfer market. Currently, he's not really dipped into it. He signed 3 players and let 3 go. So he's going to rely on what he's had last season, and they did very well. They tied up a little bit towards the end potentially. But listen, I can see them being in and around the top end of the playoffs, if not the promotion shout. And again, as it stands with what they've recruited, I can't see them quite being good enough to get promoted. But that may change in the next couple of weeks with loan signings or the likes of Shimanga, I believe, has been training with them. Kabongo Shimanga has been training with them. He's still without a club after being released from Peterborough. A definite proven National League striker. Will he end up at Southend? If he does, then is he the firepower they require to get into that sort of top 2 or 3? So yeah, be interested to see how they do, because it's the first season in the last 3, in the National League, that they can actually concentrate on just footballing matters.
For me, then 4th place, I've gone for Solihull Moors. Of course, they finished 5th last season, and I can only see them getting stronger. I just feel that the top 3 that I've picked, I don't think anyone will be able to touch them, in my opinion. I just think they'll be a lot better than the rest of the division. But, they've kept last season's squad to a certain extent. Maycock's obviously moved on now. Sabara's moved on. But the players that recruited, John Bostock coming from Notts County, he's a player that's got plenty of EFL experience, got promoted with Notts County and was one of the key players when he was brought in. Stevens is still there, who had a very good season last season. Has proven to score goals. Osborne, Warburton, someone on his day who can, create some great moments like I saw when he was at Halifax. And even defensively, Laurie Walker coming in from Barnet, another goalkeeper that's well respected at this division. So for me, Solihull, I think they'll be in a similar position to what they were last season. I think they've replaced well and are probably a slightly stronger side than what they were last season. So for Fourth place for me, I think Solihull Moors. The top three then, now this is where it does start to get quite interesting, I would say. Let's start things off with third place then. Who have you gone for, Paul?
I've gone with Barnet.
That's a shock in a way, I suppose.
It isn't. They were the most improved team last year or the year before. They improved again last year. They've clearly gone and spent some money this season. But have they got what it takes to get it over the line? They've been in and around it the last 2 or 3 seasons in the FA Trophy and in the league. And when it's really come to the crunch, have they found the bottle to do it? And I don't think they have. And this isn't me speaking as a Wealdstone fan, it being, our rivals. It's just they don't seem to, when it really matters, nail it down and get it done. And is that the management? Is that the players? Is that just the mentality? Is that the inexperience? All these things could be questioned. But genuinely, I just, they'll be there or thereabouts because of the recruitment that Dean Brennan and Tony Clanthos has backed. It's good, but the goalkeeper, I don't know much about the goalkeeper. Reece Brown from Woking, I've seen him play Wealdstone a number of times. Inconsistent due to injury. Nicola Tavares, one of the best defenders in this league, without a shadow of a doubt, doesn't break sweat. It's like a Rolls Royce. Inconsistent with injuries. But then when you look at also who he's recruited, Grimwood from Braintree, Finley Wilkinson from Hitchin, Joe Wright from Worthing. These are lads that haven't played in this league. So are they going to be starters? He's got rid of his experience in the likes of Gorman and Walker, and those sort of players. He's done very well to keep Hartigan. I think that's a real positive. You speak to any Barnet fan, they loved Anthony Hartigan last year, and he, done well to keep him. Miles Kenlock, I like the look of. I saw him play for Ipswich in the Football League a couple of times a few seasons ago, and really thought he was push on. I'm surprised he's at National League level. But Billy Clifford from Ebbsfleet, brilliant football on his day. Will he be a starter? There's a lot of unknowns in there in terms of what Dean Brennan will put together as a team. I just worry for them mentally and having that sort of the next thing to be able to get across the line. So that's why I put them in third place.
Third place for myself then, I've gone for Forest Green Rovers, who've come down and haven't been afraid to spend money, let's put it that way, with the players that they've brought in. I think they'd probably be the side that have made the most amount of statement signings, you might say, them in York. But, you look at the players that they've brought in, Ben Tozer, Sercombe coming from Cheltenham, Knowles, someone who did very well with Yeovil a few seasons ago. They've kept players from last season, like Doige, someone who's been prolific in this Forest Green side when they actually got promoted from this division. But they've kept quite a lot of last season's squad that got relegated from the Football League. And, we always say that there isn't much of a gap between the Football League and the National League, and I still don't think there is. So when you're relying on players from last season that got you relegated from the Football League, how are you supposed to be able to rely on those to be able to get you back into the Football League? I personally don't think they will, and that's why I've put them third. The players that they've brought in, the 5 or 6 players that they've brought in for me are probably massive statement signings that are too good for this division. But they're aging players. Ben Tozer is someone that's aging. Sercombe, still there from Cheltenham, an aging player. Doige, someone who they've kept, is not the same player as what he was when he got promoted with Forest Green Rovers. They've got a very good manager in Steve Cottrell for me, and that's part of the reason why I've still got them in the top 3. And if you can get the best out of these players who they've brought in, then I think they will be in the top 3 for me. But I just think with them getting relegated from last season, and I just think it's going to take time for them to adjust to this division. So I think they're a side for me that I think are going to start slow, but as the season gets on, I think they're going to get stronger and stronger. So I've got Forest Green Rovers in third place. Then second place, then Paulie, who have you gone for? You're muted.
I've bucked the trend here, Luke, and I've gone with Sutton United second. So I've gone with 2 teams that got relegated to get promoted first and second, or finish first and second. Now, what I like about Sutton and what I like about Forest Green, because Forest Green are first, is they're not a complete basket case off the field, like we've mentioned before. Teams that have come down before, there's been reasons, not just the fact that on the field they haven't performed in League Two, but Sutton seem to be stable off the field. Forest Green Rovers, clearly with Dale Vince in charge, has got a bit of cash, is stable off the field. They just haven't quite done it on the field. And I can see it to a certain point with both clubs because they haven't got big fan bases. Sutton United they were a non-league team. They've risen up through the leagues. I used to watch them as a kid playing a Deodora Premier and all that sort of thing. So, they've done very, very well. So there's no disgrace that they've ended up back in the National League. And I just think they'll know what they're doing to get back up. The big caveat to that, the fly in the ointment, I suppose, is the fact that they have got a massive turnover in their squad. Like you said, I think they've signed one player this season in the close season that's over 23 or 24. So Steve Morrison is going for a very, very young side. He'll know what it takes to get out of this. He's played at different levels. So I just think because of the fact that they're not an absolute basket case, that they can concentrate on getting back to where they were before. Hence why I've put them in second. You're quite right. They could easily drop right into the mid-table. They could drop into playoffs. They can consolidate. But I just got a feeling that them and Forest Green will just be able to come back and then get back up again, potentially.
That'd be something quite unheard of in this division, wouldn't it? If something like that did happen with Forest Green and Sutton both finishing first and second. But for myself, I've gone for Southend United. You look at them now and they're in a great position, probably the best position they've been in a number of years with new ownership now. They did very well considering what were happening last season off the field to being finished just outside of the playoffs. If they didn't have the points deduction, they would have been comfortably inside the playoffs. They would have, I think, nabbed us to it. They've kept last season's squad that was inside the playoffs, and who knows where they could have finished if, let's say, didn't have the ownership issues. And they haven't actually needed to bring in too many players. And I think that's something that's done. They were good. They're relying on last season's squad. They're having the trust in Kevin Mayer and the players for me. They're not splashing the cash. And I think Southend, they're just going to be a real force going into this season. They've brought in a few players. That striker from Burton, the name's just gone out of my head now who they've brought in. Tisha Manga's rumoured to go there. He'd be a great signing. But I just think Southend last season, they were a very difficult side to beat, very good at home, and I can't see anything changing. I can only see them getting stronger than what they were last season. So for me, Southend will be second place. First place, then I'll allow you to go first, Paul. Most viewers will be able to work out who it is we've both put, but yeah, who have you put in first?
Yeah, I've gone with Forest Green Rovers. I was just alluded to with the Sutton. They're very good off the park in terms of stability. Dale Vince, their owner, has clearly got a bit of cash. Maybe made some mistakes last year with management and recruitment, and they're going to know that. Getting Steve Cottrell in is a bit of a masterstroke at this level. He'll know exactly what needs to be done. And like you've suggested there, signing the likes of Liam Sercombe and Ben Tozer from League Two, Jed Ward on loan from Bristol. I mean, he was Bristol Rovers' first choice goalie a few times last season. He got into the England under 2020 side, I think. Seen him play for Wealdstone last year. Very, very good goalkeeper. So got rid of all those a lot of those that got relegated. So they won't have that negativity hanging around. They won't have that feeling of, we've been relegated. They're going to go fresh. They've really made some statements with the signings they made in terms of their League Two potential. And I just genuinely think that, if they can just respect the league and get along and do it quietly, they'll end up winning the league again.
Now, for me, I've gone for quite a common one. I think they're probably going to be the favourites with the bookies at the start of the season. I've gone for Barnet. Now, Barnet have kept last season's squad. The key players are still there. They've brought in Hantigan, who's come back from last season, who was one of the best players in this division. I'd go as far to say that's the best bit of business, I think, in the entire of the National League. Reece Brown's coming to add to the forward line. Ken Locke from Ebbsfleet was one of the best defensive players for Ebbsfleet last season. You know, and they've kept, like us keep echoing, they've kept last season's squad and they've just added to it. And, you know, the issue was last season, they didn't have the depth come the end of the season to be able to get over the line. They've now brought in players to be able to add to that depth. They've got a 27-man squad. I think it's probably the biggest squad in the division. They've got a good manager in Dean Brennan. So for me, I think you can't see past them. They came second last season and they've only got better. So I think there's a massive open door there for them to be able to win the league and get back into the Football League. If you actually look at the squad, of course, there will be questions like you've mentioned about them being able to get over the line, because last season losing to Solihull was a bit of a shock. Prior to that, losing to Boreham Wood was a bit of a shock. But I just feel this season they've kept last season's squad. They've added to it. They've got depth. There's loads of goals in that side. I think Barnet should go on to win the league title. Don't know what your thoughts are on that, Paul, but
no, I mean, it's without a doubt a case for them, and there was strong considerations for that, without a doubt. And I you know, if Barnet don't go, if they go on to them win the league, rather, I wouldn't be surprised because of what they've done, what they've got in their squad, how well Dean Brennan has got them to this point. It's just making that next step. Can they take it on? And that's where I worry that they can't, and that, you know, they might prove me wrong.
Fair enough then, Paul. Just trying to think if there's any predictions that either of us might highly disagree with. I'm trying to think of any for yourself that I might disagree with. But no, to be fair, I think our predictions are quite different to last season, I would say. We've kind of disagreed quite a lot more than what we did last season. But no, overall, it's been good to have you on once again and to get your opinions on the predictions. And let's hope that I can beat you to it, because I think on the prediction side last season, 1 to 24, you did better than me. But of course, on the game week predictions, I think I did slightly better.
Yeah, he certainly did. So yeah, that starts again this week, doesn't it, Luke? So yeah, we'll no doubt we'll see how we get on with the predictions going forward. But yeah, I don't really want to be wearing a Barnet shirt at the end of the season again. No. So hopefully I can do better than I did last time.
Yeah, and I don't want to be wearing a Rochdale shirt come the end of the season. But no, thank you to everyone that's tuned in to this podcast and predictions. I know there'll be a lot of people that will be new. So if you are new, please consider subscribing below, getting your comments in. We go live every single Thursday usually. If we don't, we'll usually try reschedule and predict, do our predictions for all the game weeks every single Thursday. So yeah, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also like it and check out our sponsors. There'll be a link in the description. And I think that most wraps things up. So bye for now.